Calling the meeting to order. If everybody will identify their record, so let's just identify ourselves for the record. Dennis, starting with you.
Dennis Wheeler, municipal attorney.
Chris Birch, Assembly.
Bill Starr, Assembly.
Dick Trainey, Assembly.
Jim Stevens, Election Commission.
Petey Strang, Election Commission.
Barbara Wallace, Election Commission.
Gwen Matthew, Election Commission Chair.
Barbara Jones, Municipal Clerk.
You
You
can
guys can
identify
identify yourself.
Sean Dugan, reporter, Alaska Dispatch.
And Randy Rudrick's here too.
And,
I'm not sure what he is anymore.
right.
Community terrorist. He's here.
Activist.
Activist.
And-
Hey, Randy, I have fun with you. You know that. I've known you for how long? 20 years? A lot that time.
And then, could you please identify yourself?
Eugene Haberman.
Okay, now that we've identified everybody, Chris, you've got an ordinance coming forward to us. Do you want to describe your ordinance and we'll go on to the commission?
Basically, the ordinance revision was drafted by Mr. Wheeler, and it restores to the municipal code the provision for providing public access to absentee voter addresses. And past practice, certainly for the 3 times that I have run assembly campaigns in 5, 8, and 11. Past practice was that the record of where an absentee ballot was directed was provided to the public and any candidate. And that was discontinued a couple of years ago. And this basically restores that by a revision to the code that enables that information to be made publicly available.
Thank you, Chris. Charter Commission, you guys met earlier. You want to come up to the table, please, so that Stark can hear you guys? If you would.
Yeah, Gwen's going to speak first.
Okay.
Yeah, so
We met this morning and we have proposed a resolution. Barbara, do you want to hand those out? That we oppose the proposed Anchorage Ordinance 2014-38, allowing public disclosure of absentee mailing addresses. And do you want me to read it?
If you would.
Whereas the Anchorage Election Commission worked with the Municipal Clerk's Office and the Municipal Attorney's Office in the rewrite of Title 28, AO 2013-130 and subsequent versions, including the S1 and the S1 as amended. And whereas the Election Commission supported the passage of A 02013-130 S1 as amended. Whereas the Anchorage Election Commission was aware of and supported the provision in that as amended, prohibiting the disclosure of the address where the ballot of an absentee voter is mailed. And whereas the rewrite of Title 28 was approved by the Assembly on January 14, 2014, and whereas the Anchorage Election Commission and voters have begun preparing for the April 1st, 2014 election with the understanding that the provisions of Title 28 passed on January 14, 2014 would control during this election. And whereas the Anchorage Election Commission has seen and reviewed the legal memorandum of Anchorage Municipal Attorney Dennis Wheeler dated March 2012, indicating the address where the ballot of an absentee voter is mailed is confidential and disclosure is outweighed by the voter's privacy interests. Now therefore, the Election Commission resolves the Anchorage Election Commission is opposed to the proposed AO 2013-38 because there is no need for the public to know which voters are out of town or where they are and whose houses are vacant. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Election Commission on this 6th day of March 2014.
Thanks for your work. Any questions from the Assembly members?
I've got
Chris.
one. What about the compelling need for providing voter, for an informed voter, basically, for providing, information? I mean, typically the voters receive a lot of information through the mail, and I guess that's a concern I would have. I think it's irrespective of where we're at, and I don't know if this is really a standard practice, to withhold absentee voter information from the public. I don't know if that's, it's my understanding that we're unique that way, certainly in the state, perhaps even in the country. And I guess I'm concerned about having an uninformed voter out there.
Dennis, you wrote the legal opinion. Do you want to address Chris's concerns?
My thought on that is that voters who are engaged enough to bother to arrange to receive a ballot when they're going to be out of town are probably also engaged enough to go out on the web, follow news stories, directly contact campaigns if they're interested, and so on. So they have a lot of different avenues to go out and get that kind of information if they want it. And the other thing to keep in mind is a lot of these absentee voters may not be absent for the entire election cycle, but just arrange to have the ballot so they can take care of it. So it's not necessarily the case that they're not getting information through their mailbox before or after their trip. They just want to have the ballot in hand and take care of that. So I don't have any data to suggest that they wouldn't get the information they want or need through their own methods.
Well, there just so happens to be somebody with a depth of experience in that as far as making that information available. Mr. Rudrick, I don't know, do you have anything to add regarding your experience in that?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address this issue because we put ourselves.
If you might sit at the table here, just because
Yeah.
we're trying to make sure Mr. Stark can hear. Thank you.
We have put the municipality of Anchorage in a very novel position. Voters now use absentee by mail more substantially than they ever have. They provide a mailing address, which may be their business, their post office box, or in the classic case of the absentee ballot in past years, wherever they have had to go, whether it's a temporary work location, an ill family member's home that is in town, out of state, wherever. And if we don't have the address to contact them, we're actually depriving the candidate of contacting them. We are also creating another problem. The state of Alaska has given the voter the opportunity to suppress their residential address. So there were names on the list last year that had no address. And if you have a fairly frequently occurring name, Joe Jones, there's a very high likelihood that there are a person with that name in all 6 of the assembly districts. Which one filed the absentee ballot? We have no idea which voter might even want to try to figure out the candidate cannot figure out which voter to solicit for with information. And then finally, we have a way to solve that problem that you've addressed about the vacant home. With the list that you're now providing, you're actually providing the home of the absentee ballot requester. You're providing the residence. Your ordinance exactly does what you claim to be avoiding. If you make the residential address available, you are letting people know who may not be home. I would suggest that you provide something less transparent, such as the precinct and district number of the voter, so that it's he lives in an area that has maybe 900 homes, not specifically 917 Glen Street. So I would suggest that the proper way to do this so that the voter can be informed whether he is in town or out of town, and that we don't disclose the address, the physical address of where the voter lives, which is why the state has allowed the voter to suppress their address, and most of these voters haven't. So we're able to disclose those and advise people that they're not home. Not quite what we want to do. So I suggest that the proper process is to provide the full registered name of the voter so that the candidate can figure out, is it Joe E. Jones, Joe K. Jones, Joe H. Jones III, living in a precinct in 15305 in North Anchorage, or in 22900 in West Anchorage, so that residence is protected, and we give them the address so that mail can be sent to those individuals, as it has been in every jurisdiction that I know of in this country except this one. Questions?
Thank you, Randy. Barbara,
Yes.
your point of view on this? You're here.
Well, I
You got a
admit,
point of
I,
view?
I,
Chris?
point.
Sorry, Bill?
When you have a chance, yes.
Bill on the phone.
yeah.
Bill,
Yes.
what was your comment?
Well, I have a question for the Election Commission, if you don't mind, prior to Barbara weighing in. I have two questions for you upon consideration, and then maybe Barbara can weigh in. But what would be the probability that you could have, say, an outside solicitor that and this does border on voter fraud, that somebody in Cincinnati could potentially be the collecting address for a number of these folks? Is there mechanisms that, besides the observation because of public review, that a whole bunch of ballots are going to a specific post office box in Cincinnati? So what's the protection mechanism that if in fact we continue to suppress this, that somebody doesn't pick up on the fact that we just sent 100 ballots to some P.O. box in Cincinnati? What is the mechanism for that?
Bill, that's not an election commission question, that's a
Clerk election.
clerk
I
election.
qualified my question, Barbara, I don't mind.
No, okay.
But did the Election Commission ponder that aspect of it to verify that we have a mechanism?
The process, the way it works is when you apply for an absentee ballot by mail, you have to provide an identifier. And the rules are very strict on the identifiers. For example, and it also has to have a signature of the voter. You have to provide, for example, the last four of the social and a birth date. If they're not correct, you don't get the absentee ballot. We do try to call to figure out if there was an error, but the process is very strict. We follow the state of Alaska's process, and I do not believe that we have ever seen anything that you're suggesting happen, and you are absolutely correct. If something like that happened, it would certainly come to our attention. So because you have
I
to
don't
have...
know, how would it come to your attention, Barbara? And I don't mean to challenge you. And I forgot to do a disclosure. I'm actually a candidate for re-election, and I actively have used the system of allowing me to contribute. So I also want to disclose the fact that I'm a candidate and have used that. Barbara, I've had situations in my situation where it would appear to be an overly large family. I think 3 years ago when I was doing this, I sent 11 notices of campaign information to one address, 11 of them. And I thought it was odd. And, it's a very large family, maybe that was the anomaly, but...
I have 13 children.
My concern is that you could have somebody that provided sense of a voter service, okay, they actively give the 4-digit disclosure number to, say, a voter service that's going to help coordinate ballot preparation and collection with the influence potential. So my challenge is there anybody that does that on a regular basis, look to see and investigate why did we send 11 or 13 ballots to that, even though they may have had the last 4 digits, how did they obtain that? We've got a lot of other challenges, and the extra set of eyes, or, I'm not going to send 100 to one location without asking a question. So is there a mechanism, Barbara?
Yes, and Dennis has a response to this. So for every, just so you know, for every absentee by mail request for a ballot, we have a data entry group who is entering the data into an Excel spreadsheet, and they are confirming whether or not those people are eligible. And remember, it's not just the last four of the social. its last four, and birth date. So it's a very complex process. And we would be happy to show it to you if you'd like to see it. But and I'm going to let Dennis answer, because I think he probably knows better than I do what the answer would be here.
Well, just on the back end of that one, we've only sent one ballot to that one person with those identifiers, and when it comes back in, then that ballot, Gwen, help me out here, that ballot is checked because they have to have the right certifications on that return,
Right.
right? Whether it's a witness or a notary or an election official, whatever it might be, to verify that person was the one who executed that ballot.
Yeah, it just doesn't preclude a company from advertising the service, willingly letting the voters provide that data and willingly fill in the boxes that they may market to. That's the only point I was getting at was is somebody watching the list? And I would venture to say that the frequency and the pace of the election office, as I know it, operating out of the clerk's office, potentially there's not that double check that reviews the entire list or does a certain sort that would say send me all the similar addresses. So yeah, I don't doubt that this mechanisms exist, but you could have a willing voter population that was marketed externally. And it may be far-fetched, but as we become more electronic and more disclosing and more self-identity and all of that, it's not hard sometimes to get last four and birth date public search records. So that was one point of challenge that I think that it's helpful from a fraudulent perspective. And then the second one, Mr. Wheeler, I question whether or not the voters have the traditional sense now that they're very, my experience with them is they're very inclusive of me sending them my data. And so I've had more and more experiences that, well, I didn't vote for you because I didn't hear anything from you, or you didn't provide me the data as related to your platforms. The expectation that they hear it on the radio, they see it on TV, or they get something in the mail is very much the trend, as opposed to them calling me, going, hey, tell me your platforms. It's probably a 10 to 1 where the expectations are going to get something from me. And I'm with Mr. Birch. I think it inhibits my ability to inform the voters, educate them on bond questions, and especially in the final days of when it's important, which is right before they fill up whatever box. So I concur with you, but the statement that the voters are more inclined to the savvy voters that are doing absentee, I don't know if they're really going to go after my website address or search me out. I think they're traditionally cultured now to get something in the mail and be swayed through that, not in an inappropriate way, but in an education informing way. So thank you.
Yeah, when I looked at this, the focus of this is what is the municipality's need and purpose for the address. The need and purpose for the address is so that the voter can get a ballot. It's not designed either as a primary or secondary purpose to facilitate campaigns and candidates. It's purely as a convenience to the voter to get the ballot. So from that perspective, I have yet to identify what the municipal purpose would be in facilitating the use of these addresses for campaigns and candidates. I understand the argument, but it just hasn't been part of the purpose statements or findings that I'm aware of for providing this as a convenience to the voters.
Well, respectfully, absolutely respectfully, and not as a flippant candidate, I feel like I have the right to the data and the right to get it from an organized municipal entity. It seems to be valid data, which is helpful for me to do it. So when you hold that data from me or make it harder for me to get, or confusing because I may have to do 6 postal inquiries to reach my district as opposed to what Mr. Friedrich says, give us the district that they're in, we can focus it down from there. But I feel quite bluntly that as a candidate, I'm being discriminated against on public information. That's my point. As I feel like the candidate, I have the right to get it. Maybe a minority right, or the greater good is best served by me not having it. But my intention is purely simple: to get my message to that person before they cast their vote. I would like to influence them to vote for me.
I just wanted, as a matter of record, I just want to note that Adam Tromley has signed on using my cell phone. He's on the speaker. Adam, can you hear us?
Yeah, I want to apologize to everybody there. My grandfather recently passed away, and we've been just dealing with a lot of family stuff, and it's been consuming, so I really apologize to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Trey, for running the meeting.
Sorry for your loss, Adam.
Thank you.
Dennis, I read your
Is there a
advisory
response
letter.
To the candidate, right, Mr. Trini? I didn't want to be interrupted there. Does Mr. Wheeler have any
Go ahead, Mr. Wheeler.
conversation about my candidate rights?
Well, again, I understand that candidates have rights with respect to some of the records the municipality keeps, particularly in trying to verify that voters are qualified voters and where those qualified voters reside.
Sure, I get
Right,
that.
but when I analyze what we had on the books for code, to me, particularly because the Alaska Constitution has a very specific right to privacy, which does not exist in, for example, the federal Constitution, that I felt that the balance weighed in favor of privacy in this instance, and so that's why I proposed that code change. That,
Yes.
yeah, so yeah, certainly reasonable minds can disagree on where that balance comes out.
Okay, thank you.
But focus on the primary purpose of collecting the address and then the privacy right. I just weighed it in balance of maintaining the privacy.
Well, my primary, of course, and that's been disclosed out, is to get my information in the hands of the voters, the most current. And if I send it to voter address on the record or whatever way I can come up with voter record, it may not be current, a waste of money, and I might miss the opportunity to influence their vote through critical information that I have right up to the minute of the season closing. So that's not I'm not selfish in that motivation. When it comes to candidates informing, that's the best voter is the one that knows the best who they're voting for.
Adam, do you have any comments or questions or anything?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Well, since we're not an official work session, this is informational only. I think we're done unless somebody has something else they want to say. Thanks for being here. This issue will come up on Tuesday.
Thanks, Mr. Trainee, for running the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.